Lies of P is an excellent Souls-like adventure. It's a steampunk fantasy reimagining of the story of Pinocchio from 1883. You know, the doll whose nose gets bigger every time he lies and eventually becomes a real boy? It reminds a lot of people of Bloodborne or BioShock, although more European, with Italian characters, annoying French music, and a hotel with a Dutch name. It's a bit dark, sometimes creepy, and often visceral, but with an elegance that sets it apart, just enough to be something slightly less derivative. Lies of Perpetual Motion has the slow movement, stamina bar, dodge roll, and the giant intimidating boss fights that these kinds of games are known for. It's the usual blend of run through an area, collect items, find secrets, avoid traps, defeat a bunch of low to mid-tier enemies, and eventually find the boss room and beat your head against an intimidating enemy until you are rewarded with a bolsterous sense of achievement and the ability to progress until you hit the next brick wall. It combines the dodge-focused gameplay of traditional Souls games with the perfect parry system of Sekiro and Wolong Fallen Dynasty. You are given a lot of freedom whether to use one, the other, or both. I started the game doing a lot of parrying, but later I decided on dodging more often because I was more comfortable with that. When you acquire a weapon in Lies of Pain Train, you can assemble and reassemble it at no cost to you. The weapon's speed and attack combos are based on the handle, and the blade dictates the kind of damage. For example, I really liked the thrusting weapons, but I realized that I was fighting other puppets and they are weak to lightning. So I put a lightning blade top on my thrusting weapon handle. There are lots of these customizations. Other mechanics include the ability to summon a specter during boss fights, and a cube that you can use during battle to buff said specter. Your left arm can be customized into a lightning rod, flamethrower, shield, or enemy grapple with an energy bar. You are also given several choices in the game that affect the ending, and there is weapon durability, which you have to restore using your own metal arm/grinder. You can also upgrade your Pinocchio by finding quartz throughout the game, sitting in a chair and upgrading your heart, or P organ as it is called. P organ. No wonder my amateur self chuckled like a girl all the time. Here are some good things I liked about the game. The weapon swapping system in Lies of Politicians is cool, and you can experiment quite a bit. The training room is right next to the weapon vendor, so it's easy to test out weapons quickly. I played it on PC, and right out of the gate, the game ran at a pretty consistent 60 FPS. There were a few minor things, but I didn't really notice a lot of slowdown. On the first patch, they nerfed the bosses instead of the player, which made me very happy. They didn't feel like they had to nerf a bunch of stuff because it made the game too easy. There is a lot to explore and find in Lies of PE class. Items that you find here and there can be given to NPCs to get items and secret story reveals. When selecting an area to fast travel to, the game will tell you if there is an unfinished quest in that area, as well as highlighting NPCs that are in one area or another. Lies of Piss Poor Parries allows high-achieving players to fight bosses solo and really learn the mechanics and embrace the full challenge. While players who don't want to spend the next 50 attempts on the same boss because, well, let's say they have a full-time job and responsibilities and every hour is precious, they can summon a specter that will help you get through the boss fight a bit faster. I would usually try the boss a few times solo until I got tired of getting killed by the same BS jumping attack or whatever, and then I would expedite things by summoning a specter. I like the atmosphere and music in Lies of Pleasant Punctures, although I thought the music would be a little more whimsical and unique. The composer could have used a child's music box, or maybe a marimba and some clock sounds, or creepy sound design with unsettling noises. Anything that would be a little different than the norm, but the music ended up being the standard practice of using silence with ambient sounds until the music really cranks it up. The music is pleasant, usually atmospheric in nature, until the boss fights, where the big sweeping orchestral tracks kick in that start to sound the same after a while, especially if you have to fight the boss a lot. I like an epic OST, and it is very welcomed in this game, but a little more avant-garde would have been nice. And now the not so good. Weapon durability is a thing in Lies of Pointless Prancing, and it's almost completely unnecessary. It's simply there for people who don't pay attention. I would fight entire bosses and never have to worry about it. It's there so they can add grinders with elemental properties and have passive stats that increase when the gauge is full. In my opinion, you could remove it and almost nothing would change. When you block, you still take damage. If you attack quickly, you can get some health back, but bosses don't like to give you that opportunity. They still seem to have programming that says, attack when the player gets close, and that's all they do. They like to play that puzzle game where they start the attack and you're like, when do I dodge? Perfect parries are hard to do in Lies of Pinkie Pie. The timing is weird and not as sticky as the other recent games like Wolong. They patched the game, but one thing the community wanted was a more lenient timing window for parries, and that didn't really happen. Also, most bosses are 2 health bar fights. That's what makes the game really tough. I like the challenge here, but sometimes the first form is really tanky and makes the battle a slog. When you get hit with a large attack, you will fall to the ground, and there is no quick recovery. It's like the game is putting you in timeout so you can think about what you did wrong. I hate this. Lies of Piercing Plosives doesn't have a lot of materials to upgrade weapons until later in the game. Then they'll become more available and shops will carry them. But it suggests that you should stick to one type of weapon, which is fine, but this is not Neo 2 and weapons don't have a large move set, and there are a lot of similar weapon types. This is one aspect of the game that makes it a bit bland. You can only do the same thrusting attacks so many times. Well, that's enough complaining. I'd like to provide some quick tips if you're interested in trying out Lies of Parker Posey. After you beat the 4th major boss, you can trade his item in for this spear. It's a slow thrusting weapon that takes some stamina to use, but it has a 30% critical rate, and with an item later in the game that increases critical damage, it's nasty. Definitely worth using, especially the lovely running attack it has too. In an area called the Malum District, a quarter of the way through the game, you can find a black market merchant. He will require an item, but when you get access to his shop, you can buy infinite amounts of throwing items. This can be a game changer for you scrubs out there, including me. Hey, sometimes the bosses get cheesy and you just want to cheese them back. Throwing items do good damage and can give your enemy status effects. For those who are still hesitant to play Lies of Prideful Pandering because you think that Soulslikes are too hard, just remember that if you're having trouble at a boss, you can first put quartz into getting more healing. Then you can summon the Spectre before the boss fight, which you will always have plenty of materials for. When you get the cube later in the game, you can use it to make your Spectre stronger. Then while it draws aggro, you just hit the boss from behind. You can use the gun arm that has a ranged attack, while the Phantom is distracting the boss. If the Spectre does die, you'll still have a bunch of healing left, and you can always buy the throwing items from the black market, up to 15 of them, and spam the boss if you're out of potions. You can give yourself a pretty big advantage. There are lots of ways to make the game less painful if you're not into masochism. Overall, Lies of P is a very good game, and its few flaws don't ruin it. You may spend some time yelling at your monitor and waking up your roommate at 2 a.m. I never get any sleep around here! Shut up! But give in to the pain a little and you will find a solid experience that seems to get better as you get better, with plenty of secrets and experimentation in a tight package. If you enjoy Soulslikes, you may be already playing this, but I think it's accessible to all players, at least those who are okay taping their controller to their hands and taking some Prozac. This is Dan T of Twisted Banana Productions, cutting the strings to touch some grass.